Okay, good morning, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back. Five to go. Parsha Shemos, Tav Shin, Pei Dalet, 5784. It is very exciting to open a new Sefer. For me, you got to shift all the Bereshis Farim back to the shelves, which is sad in a certain way. But then the excitement comes when you bring the Shemos Farim to your desk, to your table, and there's a level of excitement there with beginning a new Sefer. We are so familiar in a very loving way with the book of Shemos and the stories, especially of the first half of Sipor Yetzias Mitzrayim. Many of us have really wonderful memories sitting around the Seder table and talking about the Haggadah and the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And we are very familiar with the story in many ways. And therefore, it is also more difficult to find new ways to look at this story, look at the psukim, and understand the parashios that we are going through. We are living through many of the parashios right now, from Bereshis through now, and the Jewish people going through a very challenging and difficult time, hoping and yearning for a moment where we can have a geula, where we can be redeemed. That a foreign government is oppressing us, and we can have a time where we feel free to be who we are. So where does that all start? How does the Shibud Mitzrayim start? And we're not going to learn it today, but in previous years, I've quoted to you a Ramban, a very powerful Ramban, who asks a very simple question. This is a very sophisticated nation, perhaps the most advanced nation in the entire world at the time. That's Egypt. That's where Egypt was. And how could it be that they get to a level where they are literally taking babies and throwing them into the water? How could it be that such a sophisticated people, human beings, could stoop so low to murder children right out of their womb? It's a question that the Jewish people have asked themselves throughout our history. And, October 7th, in many ways, is a continuation of that question. And the Ramban writes is that it started off very, very slow and quietly. It wasn't like one moment it wasn't like this. And the next moment, there was a new policy change. But things slowly crept in. Paro's systematic approach to murdering the Jews and getting rid of them and subjugating them began with baby steps, quietly spreading rumors about the Jews and sharing that maybe they aren't human, or they're lower than the other, or they are the other. And that process slowly corroded the culture of Egyptian society in all classes. Uvenei Yisrael paru vayirchetzu vayirbu vayatzmu bimod ma'od v'timalei ha'aretz osam. The Jewish people grew and grew and grew. We know, Rashi tells us, 6 babies at a time, right? My children at the Seder, when they were younger, they would stuff 6 babies into their dress, their Pesach dress, and to emulate the story. The Sforno writes on this pasuk, paru vayishritzu. Vayishritzu can mean that they just promulgated, it's so many, or it comes from the word sheretz. Sheretz is a bug that the Mitzrim or Paro, put out propaganda about the Jewish people that we were like vermin. This is Nazi Germany. This is where they got their playbook from. Paru vayishritzu vayirbu vayatzmu. And slowly that, became part of the cultural milieu. And it became okay to talk about the Jews in a disparaging way, in a dehumanizing way. So then kids that were growing up in the next generation, it was easy for them to kill a Jew or hurt a Jew because Jews weren't really human. They were meant for us to use and to abuse and to harass. And it slowly happens. It doesn't happen like that. The way maybe that you could read the psukim. The psukim are in history book. That's the way it begins. The Torah tells us, "Vayakam melech chadash am Mitzrayim, asher lo yada es Yosef." Vayakam melech chadash, a new king came about, arose, who did not know Yosef. Says Rashi, Rav Ushmuel, Chadamar chadash mamish. Some say that it was a new king, a brand new king. And that makes sense. We can understand why bringing in a brand new Paro is going to lead ultimately to the subjugation, the slavery, the servitude of the Jewish people, because he didn't know anything from beforehand. V'chad amar shenischadshu gzeirosav. And others say it's the same Paro, but he changed his personality, right? He changed his rules, his gzeros, his decrees in Mitzrayim. The Rabbi Rabinovich, who we are very fond of quoting over the past few months, he says here that this is the first sign of Galus, or this is the first sign that the Jewish people are going to go down. And this is a breach of Hakaras Hatov. When the Egyptians can no longer appreciate what the Jews have brought to their society, then that's going to completely, if that's not coming from on top, and there's no appreciation for what's happening, then eventually what's going to happen is that if you're not appreciated, then usually the opposite emotion is there. You are downgraded, you are rejected by the people in which you live. They can't live with you. The Chai Adam writes in his halachos, Kol hakofer b'tuvaso shel chavero, sof kofer b'tuvaso shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. Anybody that denies goodness that somebody does to them eventually will become a kofer, will deny the existence of the Ribono Sh'olam. Asher lo yada es Yosef. It parallels at the end of it. They didn't know Yosef. They didn't know Yosef. When they're studying economy, when they're studying economics in college, who are they studying? They're studying Yosef. He was part of their history. He saved them from financial ruin as all the other countries around them were destroyed from that famine. Yosef was the one that saved them. What's unbelievable is at the end of the parsha, what happens? Moshe says, let my people go, because Hashem said. And Paro says, lo yadati es Hashem. Asher lo yada es Yosef. We don't have a karetz tov. Paro doesn't have a karetz tov. That leads to lo yadati es Hashem. Eventually, we don't know Hashem. The theme of Hikaras Tov comes up numerous times throughout the parsha. The entire reason why Moshe marries Sipporah and finds a safe haven in Midian is because the daughters of Yisro, the 7 daughters of Yisro, appreciate what he did for them. They were being harassed by the wells. Moshe comes in and saves them. And Yisro says, hey, invite that guy over for dinner. Like, we owe him one. In next week's parsha, with the first 2 makos, Moshe or Aaron is asked to first hit the Nile River, and the second and third hit the ground, the sand. And those are given to Aaron and not to Moshe. Rashi explains, based on the Gemara, I believe in Baba Kama, that Moshe owed Hakaras Hatov. He had gratitude towards the Nile for protecting him when he was just a baby. And second and third makos, the sand covered up the Mitzri and gave him opportunity for cover. we owe gratitude not only to human beings and to people, but also to inanimate objects, to institutions, to organizations, to communities, and even to the Nile River. Moshe's name, the Mefarshim point out, and I think if I asked, we could come up with a list of about, I would say 10 to 15 different sources for the relationship between Akaras Tov and Yitzias Mitzrayim and Galus Mitzrayim. But one last one for this morning is that Moshe is given his name. Who gave Moshe his name? Basia or Bisya Bas Paro, the daughter of Paro. And that within itself is pretty unbelievable, because that wasn't his name. That was given by his parents. Moshe had 10 different names, Yekusiel, Tuvia, and many other names, Avigdor. And the name that we keep for him is Moshe, because that was given by Bas Paro, who saved him from the water. Because she saved him from the water, we have gratitude towards her, which is pretty amazing. The Menachem Tzion, Rabbi Menachem ben Tzion Zaks, writes in his Sefer, again, he was a post-Holocaust Rav from Chicago. He writes on this pasuk that Tzaros b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim hischilu ekev kafoyes tova. We see here that all the tzaros of Klal Yisrael, all the bad things happen because of somebody, Paro, being ingracious, and it starts at the top and goes down. And he writes that all of Jewish history and all of our tzaros always begin the same way. There's a pattern here. Egypt is a paradigm for all of the galios that we go through. And this is, if that's true there, it's going to be true in the future. And once people don't appreciate the Jewish people and the contributions that we have to the world or to that country, that's when things begin turning for us. An additional beautiful interpretation, Asher lo yada es Yosef. He didn't know Yosef. What does it mean he didn't know Yosef? So Menachem Tzion, this is, I think, very, very beautiful. Aderech drush. This is very much a drush. He didn't know Yosef. Who is Yosef? Yosef is the Jew that's able to live in Mitzrayim and to thrive as a Jew, and to see Hashem everywhere that he goes, no matter how far he falls and how deep of a pit he is in. Not a low the Asher lo yadas Yosef. He didn't know that we are spiritual heirs to Yosef HaTzadik, and that's our Av in Galus. And if they would have known that, they would have known they could never defeat us. We are Nitzchi because we always find a way. And in fact, sometimes because we are oppressed, that makes us closer as a nation, and that connects us more and more to the Ribono Sha'olam. But a very, very powerful thought here. Continuing on, Paro continues. Vayomer el Amo. He says to his nation. And again, slowly, methodically, Hine am b'nei Yisrael rav va'atzum mimenu. We could read this pasuk and really overlook a very powerful point. The first person in history to recognize the Jewish people, not as a family, but as a nation, is Paro. Our enemies sometimes realize our greatness more than we do ourselves. And because he realized how powerful we could be as a nation, he knew he needed to start knocking us down. They are stronger than us. They are Rav, greater than us. They're more capable than us. And if we don't, and again, then he was nervous about what was going to happen as a result of that. So he continues, Hava nischak malo. Pen yirbeh, we're afraid that they might get bigger. And if they get bigger, vayasikrenu milchama v'nosav kamhu al-sonenu, they're going to grow to a point where they could team up with our other enemies that are nearby. and launch a war from within and completely destroy us. V'nilcham banu va'ala mina aretz, and kick us out of the land. V'hava nischak malo. Chazal, there's a famous Chazal on this pasuk that tell us that Paro had 3 advisors. Who were his advisors? Bilam,
Yisro was one.
Bilam, Yisro, and Eov. Right, and he launches this plan and discusses it with them. Bilam is in and says we got to kill all the Jews and start with the babies and we got to subjugate them. And Yisro says no and fights back. Eventually, he has to run away to Midian because they're going to kill him. And Eov is silent. And Eov, because he is silent, he goes through unsufferable moments in his life, loses his whole family. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz asks, that seems to be incongruous. Why does he does nothing? So silence is worse. Being quiet is complicitness. When someone is quiet in the room, when other people are spreading lashon hara or saying terrible things, to not speak up, you are the same as everybody else. I wanted to add here, Havan Ischak Malo, the Menachem Tzion makes the point that, see, if they would have kicked the Jews out of the land, they would have looked like terrible people. They would kick people out of your land. That's not what you do. So Paro was smart. Havan Ischak Malo, he used Chachma. And so people aren't paying attention to your country. Everyone's got to focus on what's going on in their place. So he was smart, and he within was solely destroying the Jewish people. And he writes, "Bi'amenu zohi hashita shel Russia ha-Sovietit b'yachas liYehudia." So the Russians, he says, hated us too, but they could have thrown us out of the country. But if they would have thrown us out of the country, there would have been an uproar from the United Nations, from other. How can you do that? So instead, they use Chachma. We're not going to throw you out because that looks like barbaric. That's terrible. No one throws people out of a country. What they do wrong, prove it. So they use the war they fought was through Chachma, through propaganda, through lies. And here I want to share an additional interpretation. This is unbelievable. This is worth the price of the Sefer, I think, in my mind. From Rabbi Gamliel Rabinovich. He says, Hava nischak malo. You want to really get the Jewish people? You want to get them? You want to really get them to back down? Give them chachma. Acculturate them. Let them go, give them access to all of our universities. Let them go wherever they want to go. Break down the ghetto walls, so to speak. Don't just apportion them off to Goshen. Let them assimilate within our culture. Hava nischak malo. I never thought. Give them chachma. If you give it to them, they'll come to reject God on their own. They'll come. They'll lose more Jews on their own than we could even plan on our own. And how brilliant was Paro, right? How brilliant was this? We've seen it ourselves in our day. I think we actually can't even count anymore how many Jews we lose each and every year because of the love of the nations, because of the assimilation that we have, because of the chachma that we have. It's not a bad thing, or to go to a university and to get advanced degrees. Don't get me wrong, but we need to be careful in certain parts of society and be careful and have our guard up in certain areas. We also have Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim with Chachma, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, is a powerful combo. It's a powerful combination. But Chachma without Yirat Shamayim, you're asking, it's a ticking time bomb. in terms of that generation being wiped away. In a certain way, Yiras Hashem is the anti-Chachma. It's saying, don't use your intellect and just say, I believe, I have Emunah. I don't need all these Chachmos and Sichlos. I'm just going to do. And we need a little bit more of that in our day. We need a little bit more of that in our day. Havanischach Malo, Paro knew exactly what he was doing. And you see it today. The breaking down of the ghetto walls did a lot more to destroy the Jewish people and the Jewish morale than, and maybe some of our greatest enemies. Okay. So Moshe, is born. He is saved. He's hidden for 3 months because the Egyptians kept dates of all the pregnant women. And he's brought to the Nile River. He is raised by Bisya Bas Paro in the palace. It's an unbelievable story that happens. It's amazing. And he gets older and he goes out to his Echav, to his brother, to see what is happening on the field. And he sees that his brethren is getting, beaten every single day. He kills a Mitzri. He stops people from fighting, and he realizes that people have found out what he is doing, and he needs to run away. And he runs away to Midian. When he's in Midian, he again sees people that are being harassed, and he saves these women and gives them water and moves in with Yisro, and the rest is history. This is really, in this short nugget, the development of Moshe Rabbeinu as a leader. Over and over again, you'll see, and it's, if anyone couldn't really connect to the Jewish people, you would think Moshe has every excuse. He didn't really grow up in his home, in a Jewish home, in a Jewish environment. Sure, his parents were involved. It was pretty amazing. But how much did he really know? Was he really knowledgeable? Yet Moshe had a deep care and empathy towards the Jewish people. And over again, you see Vayaris Achav. He saw his brothers. He saw his brothers. He fought for his brothers. That you see something within him that it almost makes sense that Hashem would want him to be the leader of the Jewish people because of his empathy, his real feeling pain for Klal Yisrael. Moshe finds himself, actually right before that, the Torah says the following. Right before that, the Torah says, the Moshe now was a shepherd, follows in the Masorah of many of our forefathers of being shepherds, and then he has children, and then the Torah tells us, "Vayihi bayamim haravim ahim," in these great days, Vayamas Melech Mitzrayim, the Paro died. Okay, there also, did he really die, or he had saras? Vayenchu b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people grunted, they groaned, and they cried, and they davened. Vatal shavasam Elokim min avodah, vayishma Elokim es nakasam. Hashem heard their tefillos. They prayed to Hashem. They davened to God. They poured out their souls. They cried to Hashem, and Hashem remembered the bris with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and He knew how much they were going through. So Paro dies, and the Jewish people start davening, and they begin to cry. Ask the Vilna Gaon, Hiksha Hagra, this is from the Otos HaTorah, why are they crying now? When Paro dies, they have a day off. They had, according to some Mefarshim, they get off until Paro is buried. So when the king dies, they're not working. So why are they crying now? He says something very, very powerful. He says, Kolzman, as long as they were slaves, they were not allowed to cry. They were not allowed to express any emotion. And if they did, they got beaten. So for years, for decades, they had so much repressed emotions deep inside of them that for some of them, they couldn't, maybe they don't even remember if they knew how to feel. If they knew if they could be in touch with what to feel emotionally. And then Paro dies, and their taskmasters are not watching over them. And they're able to pause in that moment in time, and they're able to feel something. They're able finally to shed a tear, to cry, to have some emotion. You think about people in captivity for so long. They're not allowed to cough loud. A few weeks ago in Fairlawn, we had some of the family members of the hostages. And one of the women shared that her cousin has asthma and he has coughing fits regularly with his medication, and he doesn't have his medication with him. And it was told to them that he's not allowed to cough loud. Everything needs, and we don't even know what does that even mean for him. They haven't slept. Most of us haven't slept. So you see, right, how difficult it was for the Jewish people to express anything during that time. And the moment they had a break, they're able to really express it in a very real way. Others explain there's a very powerful Vilagon in general. Think about Holocaust survivors that couldn't express any emotion. Eventually, you lose that. People say it's like riding a bicycle. Some things aren't like riding a bicycle. You lose it, you lose that tool. You can't do it anymore. It's so hard. If you grew up with a survivor, some of us can relate to that. Others say here that what ultimately led to the Geula, it wasn't that 210, 400. We have all these numbers. What ultimately led to the Geula was tefillah. That's it. The Jewish people were given the opportunity to daven, and they used that time to daven. And the Tziv even writes, they were illiterate. This is a whole generation that were not knowledgeable because they were slaves for a whole generation or for more than one generation. They didn't know how to daven. They didn't have a sitter. They didn't have a tehillim. What do they have? But they knew there was a Avinu Shabbat and they davened. And it was through their tefillah they were able to be niga. They were able to be redeemed. Vayar Elokim es bnei Yisrael. Hashem sees the Jewish people. Vayeda, and he knows. And when they are able to express this, the Torah says, Vayeda Elokim, Hashem knows. It's such a funny thing, because doesn't God know everything? The Torah needs to tell us God knows. Says Rashi, Nasan aleim leiv. Hashem kivyachol, right, gives his heart to the Jewish people. V'lo ha'elim einav mehem, and he doesn't ignore them now. And he doesn't ignore them at this moment. They should not feel ignored. They should feel listened to. Vayeda Elokim, the Chizkuni writes, Shedavar zelo yada ish b'chavero. We don't know the pain and suffering that we all go through. We know our own pain and suffering. We don't know our friends' pain and suffering. Hashem, Vayeda Elokim, God knows what we go through. Hashem knows. the challenge and the difficulties and the late nights and the crying and the weeping. The Sforno writes, Yada nige levavam. He knows challenges, in their hearts. And Hashem understood and knew that the tefillah they were giving over now was a real tefillah. It was a heartsig, we would say, a heartsig tefillah, complete masur to the Jewish people. They understood it, and Hashem understood it. And it's from there. What's the very next pasuk? Moshe as a shepherd, and he sees the burning bush, right? And he sees the burning bush. And that leads into, this is the segue between the Jewish people being irredeemable or not being redeemed in slavery to beginning that process of redemption. And one last point from the burning bush, which requires a lot of analysis. Moshe is approached by the Ribbono Shel Olam, not by a big CEO. This is not Elon Musk or Bill Gates, who I don't think he's a CEO anymore, but you know what I mean, who is tapping him to lead a new firm or a new organization or to be his CEO or CFO or vice president. Which I think you could do it. And if we got that call, it would be hard to say no. But this is the Melech Malchei Amlachim, the Ribbono Shel Olam we're talking about, comes to Moshe Rabbeinu over and over again. Right? It says, Moshe, you're my guy. I need you to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And Moshe says no. And then Hashem says, you can do it. I'm going to give you, no, I can't speak. No, I have a lisp. No, I have this. No, I'm going to give you, and every single time Hashem adds more things. You're going to have Aaron. You're going to have the Canaan. I'm going to give you signs. I'm going to show you give you the ability to show the power of me to the Jewish people. No, no, no. Right? You think Paro is stubborn? Moshe's pretty stubborn too. Not until the end, right? Not until the end does the Torah say, "Vayichar af Hashem b'Moshe." God gets angry at Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayomer halo Aaron achicha alevi yadati ki daber daberhu v'gam hinehu yotzei lekrasecha v'rachav samach libo. Enough already, Moshe. Enough. Stop it. He gets angry. What causes Hashem to get angry right now? And again, Hashem doesn't have emotions, but he's expressing something for us to learn. So the pasuk right before this, Moshe says to Hashem, Vayomer bi Adoni, listen, my master God, shlach na biyad tishlach. Send who you're gonna send, but don't send me. And there's something about this line that Vayichar af Hashem, God gets angry. So says Rashi here, send Aaron. And the way that Rashi understands is that this entire story with Moshe's refusal is that one of the undertones here is not only that Moshe can't do it, is that Moshe feels there is somebody that can. When someone says to you, I would like you to lead this new initiative in the shul. And what do you say? No. Ask that guy, ask that girl. They are better than me. Well, I asked you. I didn't ask them. You asked them. Okay. That's the way Rashi understands it. And there's something very beautiful on one hand. Moshe and Aaron are fixing the brotherly fighting from Sefer Bereshis. Amazing in many ways, but frustrating. Other Mefarshim, the Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer writes here, and I heard this from one of my Rabbi, Rabbi J.J. Schachter. Shlach na biyat tishlach. Send who you're going to send. You know who you should send? Eliyahu Hanavi. Send Mashiach. Send Mashiach. Like, Moshe, what does that mean? Send Mashiach. And why does that cause God to get very angry at this moment? It says Rabbi Schachter, beautiful pshat, beautiful. I think I can relate to this a lot right now. Moshe says, you want me to take the Jewish people out of Egypt? It's going to be incomplete because, okay, we'll get the Torah, we'll take them to Eretz Yisrael, but then there's going to be more fighting. And then eventually, okay, they'll build the Beis Hamikdash, but before they get there, there's going to be a whole Sefer Shoftim where there's going to be idol worship, and there's going to be wars, and the Plishtim, and the Moabites, and then a lot of Jewish death. And then the first Beis Hamikdash will be built, and then it's going to be destroyed. Then the Jewish people are going to go into Galus. And then they're going to build it again and go into more Galus. And then there's going to be pogroms, inquisitions, Holocausts, terrorists, bombings on buses, suicide bombers. When's this going to end? If I take them out, it's going to be incomplete. Skip to the end of history. Skip to the end. You now, like you watch a movie, you could skip parts, right? You can skip the parts that you don't like. You could, like, if you've seen the movie 10 times, if you've seen Die Hard on, during this time of the year, skip to, I don't like this part. I don't like that part. I don't like it. Okay. We don't. So Moshe says, skip to the end. Skip to the end. That's when Hashem gets angry. You don't understand. This is like, Moshe, you're wrong. We can relate to this and appreciate this at some level, but you don't understand my ways, and I can't. And you don't understand my ways. You can't understand my ways because you are a human being, and I am Hashem. And so many of us, we would prefer to live a life where we just skipped to the end. We don't live through so much of this pain and these difficulties and these challenges. We would rather shlach na biyat. But there's something for us to gain. Ribono Shalom wants us to go through this process, this challenging, difficult, say, kor habarzal, refinement process, challenging moments in our life that the Jewish people are going through right now, and we've been going through for 2,000 years in the exile. We all feel like a Moshe Rabbeinu. And Hashem's answer is, I need you. This is part of the process of being a Jew. That's part of the journey, the Lech Lecha, of being part of Klal Yisrael, is that we have unbelievable moments and we have very challenging moments. And it's in those challenging moments that I need you to lean on me, lean on Hashem, to dig deeper in your emunah, your faith in Hashem, and really your faith in other people, in the Jewish people themselves, and be more connected, more unified. Use times like this to double down our efforts. And that time of Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come, Ezrat Hashem, sooner than later. But this is all part of, Hashem's master plan. With that, I wish everybody a good Shabbos. Just for today, we discussed Asher lo yada es Yosef, Paro's plan, the lack of a karas hatov. Asher lo yada es Yosef, he didn't know the Jewish people or Yosef people. Have an ischak malo, give the Jewish people chachma, and they will lose themselves. Shlach na biyad tishlach, the ultimate geula of J.J. Schachter. Then we discussed the yediyah, what caused the geula. It was tefillah. It was the lack of emotion, and we brought it out because we couldn't for so many years. Give everybody, we should have a wonderful Shabbos. It should be a warm Shabbos, a very special simcha in the shul this Shabbos, Ezrat Hashem, and we should only hear Besoros Tovos, Yeshuos v'Nechamos for us and Klal Yisrael.
Amen.